And this has been an open secret in the security industry for a long time. You talk to any security professional, they will tell you about how all their clients are getting hacked by China, and they're all trying to block them out, and they don't have proof. And there's more and more people are getting really angry, more and more people really want to strike back. And you could totally do that, because just like there's no court to punish us for hacking us, there's no court to punish us for hacking them. See, that's what Google did. Google just happened back. And there were no repercussions at all for that. Because there is no authority above both of us to take us in and spank us and tell us to act nice. So the only thing you can do is start a war or something. Anyway, got any questions? Yeah.
Did Mandiant hack into the hackers' computers?
Well, they don't explain how they got this data. So probably. Most people do. It's a fairly common thing to do. But you can do some of it by tempting them into hacking your machines, which you have remote control. You can watch what they're doing. You can also just get yourself hacked. Kyle Rankin did that. If you take a Linux server and connect it to the internet, you give it an easily guessed password, within a day or so somebody will hack it, and you can log and see what they do. So it's a common, useful activity. You can understand how to protect networks and how to analyze them when they get attacked. So we're down to chapter 4. So this is defense systems. Intrusion defense system, IDS. When these things first came out, maybe 10 or 12 years ago, people thought this would be the end of all problems on the internet. They thought it would be wonderful. Just lock everything on the wire before it even comes to your box. It sounds great. It didn't, of course, solve all the problems, but it helps. Intrusion prevention system, or intrusion detection system, is that block traffic. So an IDS detects traffic that is suspicious, like an Nmap port scan or something, and then it does something like log it or send an alert or a text message to the administrator, but it doesn't prevent anything. An IPS actually stops attacks in progress. It may change a firewall rule. So if anybody sends more than 10 unnecessary probe-looking packets, we'll block that IP address for half an hour. That's a fairly common one. If you act like it's suspicious, you get blocked for a while. That's all they do at Lawrence Berkeley Labs. I think they had a guy here going to talk about their system. They have a special IBS they invented called Bro, and they don't particularly network in any. They do not have any normal firewall at all. All they do is have temporary blocks when people come in and attack them. This was a big deal when they came and gave a talk about this about a year ago here, because at that time our now fired CTO was vigorously blocking vast amounts of addresses that were in response to this corrupted contractor. Millions of addresses were blocked. Whole nations were blocked from granting access to city calls because this contractor recommended it. And we very much didn't agree. We got Berkeley's statement. They do not have to block anybody permanently. They only block people that actually attack them, and they only block them for a brief period of time. And that's enough to keep them safe. Anyway, of course, it depends on your threat model. And as we were just talking about, universities are not much of a desirable thing to hack. Universities, of course, have huge security problems because you have thousands of students and teachers setting up accounts on the machines, setting up insecure servers all over the place, no real control over it. So it's easy to take over universities. Any of you could take over some portion of it just by having a student account. And half the students will choose easily guessed passwords, So the only thing is you just don't have any secrets, hopefully. Yeah, you had a question back there?
I was wondering, how come like Norton or Syntec don't incorporate IDS or IPS?
They do now.
Okay.
They absolutely do. They include a firewall. All these combined home security suites are adding more and more of these features. They originally started out separate. Anyway, so then there's two kinds of IDSs. You can put it on one host, which would be like if you get one of these software packages. Snort is the original one, but now there are many others that runs on one machine and filters its traffic. Or you can have a network device in a rack that protects your whole company. And these serve different purposes. The network device will protect the whole company, but it cannot do as thorough a job because it doesn't know anything about the operating system underneath it. And the host-based one is probably going to be slower. It might pop up alerts and irritate the user. And of course, if someone does compromise the operating system, it will stop working. So they serve a different purpose, but it will protect you from your neighbors on the network. The host, the network intrusion defense system, makes the same old-fashioned M&M security, where you have crunchy on the outside and chewy on the inside, because you've got one barrier, but once you're inside, there's no more protection from that device. So you need both. Yeah. Just wrong. Okay. So, all right. So anyway, the most common old-fashioned technique is signatures, just like antivirus software. You'll just have a list of known bad patterns of traffic, and when something is bad, you block it. This is pretty lame. It does generally block a lot of attacks, but it has several fundamental problems. One of the main ones is it's always reactive. It doesn't stop anything new. But anyway, it certainly can execute fast, and that's why when the denial of service attacks started hitting the banks, there's huge arguments about this. I mean, there was this Benghazi attack where they killed 4 Americans, and they said it was over this Islamic video. And immediately that day, I was at a security conference, and the guys that were saying, I really want to cancel my talk and talk about that, which he didn't, which I think, by the way, is a mistake. I've totally done that. When I show up at a conference and something happens, I throw away my talk and talk about something else. Nobody's ever gotten mad at me for that. I would wish he had done that. But anyway, he said he knew that was not about the Islamic video. That was nonsense. That was cover for a military operation. There's no way they could have had those guys ready to go in with troopers and shoot people. And therefore, there's now been a denial of service attack on U.S. banks, supposedly over that video also. And they had, it was at the B-sides, at Baythreat, they talked about the signatures used to stop those packets. And they were keeping that secret and not letting people report it. Because you can snort signatures that will block the attack, and if the bad guys find out that we know, they will modify the attack. So it's a big issue here to get your signatures, to get them to the right people fast enough, and try to prevent the bad people from knowing that you got those signatures. But the other way to do it is to have a smart system that works from anomaly, just detects unusual patterns of traffic. And this is what Cloudflare says they're doing. The point of Cloudflare says they're much stronger because they have many, many customers. They have something like 5% or 10% of the whole internet behind their system. So anytime anybody gets attacked, they immediately detect it, and then they block similar attacks everywhere else. So within their own system, they can learn what an attack is, write a signature, and immediately adapt to it. And so they're able to protect everybody much better than they could if they were just one company trying to get your own data. And this has been a huge problem in America. Every company, for example, they talked in that video about 150 companies have all been hacked by China, all using the same tools because they can't talk to each other. You can't take your company packet logs and share them with the government or share them with another company because there's privacy considerations. In Europe, they have a system to do that, European CERT, but they don't have anything like that in America, and it's something Obama wants to put in, but it's very hard to see how you can put that in the American system with all our lawsuits and such. But what happens, every company is pretty much on their own to figure everything out here. But one way is Cloudflare. They outsource it, and the only thing that company does is block attacks. So they can actually look at the attacks coming in from many companies and combine them. Yeah?
Are signatures basically like shellcode?
No, a signature will be any pattern in the package, and therefore it would be something distinctive, something that lets you easily detect bad packets and tell them from good packets. So it could be swear words, it could be an unusual port, it could be some pattern of, like you say, shellcode, detecting that it's going to remote control you. And snort just lets you have simple language, you can write these and put them in your rules. So any pattern you want. But you have to have some kind of pattern that's not too difficult to spot, or it'll slow down all your traffic waiting for it, and that doesn't block any good traffic. And that's a tough one, because people have all kinds of different devices sending in different patterns of traffic. And one thing that's very common is what happens at the college. You accidentally mistake good traffic as malicious traffic. That's why they thought they had thousands of viruses here, because it's ordinary network traffic is in fact very complicated. And you'll see weird things going on. It doesn't mean you're under attack or infected necessarily. You have to be much more careful about that. So it's a problem. So anyway, the active IDS, an active IDS, also called an IPS, is a thing that will block the attack. The IPS has to be in line. And these things are quite dangerous and not very commonly used because the attacker can use them to bring down your network. There was a product called Mucus, just to attack the product called Snort, the IDS. You just send it something that is going to cause it to trigger and cause them to block traffic. Then you forge the from addresses of legitimate customers, and legitimate customers are denied service. So it's a problem. And IPSs aren't all that common. Anyway, so a host intrusion detection system lives on one system and protects it. This means it can actually look at the operating system files to tell if you're being attacked by looking at the internal logs and such, like yard cache. So it has more information than a network-based intrusion detection system, so in principle it can do a better job. It can be sort of like antivirus and notice what it's actually doing to the system. Yeah?
So with that, do you need to install one of those on each of the OSs?
Yes. It's only going to protect that one machine. So typically you only put it on a server. You don't normally put these on workstations.
Okay.
Because they're just too much burden. Your network intrusion detection system is just a rack-mounted device, like a hardware firewall, sitting in a box, blocking all obviously malicious traffic from your whole company. And therefore, it is usually harder to hack into that device because it's running a proprietary Linux-based OS as opposed to your Windows workstation. But it, of course, can't open encrypted traffic, and it doesn't have much information to blockade on, so it's not going to stop as many attacks in principle. Anyway. I've not yet been able to figure out any way to tell this thing what time of day to do this, so it always goes off in the middle of the lecture. There ought to be somewhere an adjustment, but I haven't been able to find it.
You can manual it.
I can make it so it will never update. Maybe I'll just do that. Yeah. Anyway, so it doesn't really matter on a Mac that much either. Anyway, so signature-based. We've been here. Yeah. All right. This means you have a database like antivirus, and you have to keep updating it. The anomaly-based ones mean you have to know what normal traffic is. So you can detect deviations from normal traffic, and that is not so simple at all. But you have to somehow create this baseline of what's normal.
Kind of like AI a little bit.
It is. And AI engines are the best way to probably go forward in this. I really have artificial intelligence that learns this. And those are really moving forward. Stanford had a free artificial intelligence course that was so powerful that they learned a TC409 hacker group figured out how to defeat Google's CAPTCHA with the AI. The AI learned them. It was very nice. Anyway, so AI is probably the way of the future here. Really, artificial intelligence is noticing, like a human would, what's weird here. I know on our campus, another thing that happened is we had the Microsoft Academic Alliance downloads where students get free copies of Windows. And for a while, we hosted that on campus. And when we first turned that on, there was a huge spike. We never had traffic in campus more than like 1 or 2 megabytes per second, and suddenly it was 100 megabits per second for 2 days. They thought we were under attack. It was every student downloading all the Microsoft stuff all at once from our on-campus server. Anyway, so the IDS can look at firewall logs, system logs, whatever it's got, as well as the packets that are flying by, and try to find something that tells it something malicious is happening. Then alarms are one simple thing, where it just informs the administrator in some way that something bad has been detected. But your goal is to set the threshold so that you don't drive the administrator nuts with false positives, 100 alerts a day when nothing's bad, nothing's wrong, because they'll obviously just turn that off and ignore it. That's what Vista's user account control was. It irritated you 100 times a day for nothing, so everybody just turned it off. And you want to make it low enough that it does detect real attacks, and that is really just sort of a black art right now, which is really a shame. I mean, you don't tune up your antivirus. You don't have to have your antivirus say, there are 15 suspicious softwares, please do hours of research on the internet for each one of these and decide which one is really a virus. They did say that when they first came out. That's what spyware, anti-spyware products really did. They would say, here are the 100 possible threats on your machine. It would just give you technical details about them as if you could tell. And that's what rootkit finders still do, at least the one I tried a year or two ago. But that is almost useless, obviously. You want it to automatically make that decision and just tell you the bottom line, not expecting you to figure it out. So that's your threshold, which is tough. What do you want? You want to take 50 incomplete handshakes from the same IP? If you block those, then there's some clown out there that's got a really miserable wireless access point and keeps getting dropped is actually not going to see your website. But they probably weren't going to be able to get through anyway. You have to make a judgment. It's similar to the judgment you make about how much downgrading you want to let people do. Do you really want people to say, I'm a Windows 3.1 box, I can only handle 40-bit encryption. Please give me a 40-bit encryption key. Or do you want to just put up an error message and say, go buy a better computer before you can see my website? But if you do let people downgrade that far, then attackers can downgrade that far, and they can defeat encryption. So it's the same as everything, You have to make a judgment at your company. Like I say, most companies prefer to just block China completely. We don't have any Chinese customers, forget them, block them, that ends us a whole world of grief. But this college is emphatically not willing to do that. We very much want Chinese people to look at our website and decide to come take classes here. That's great. So you have to understand what's appropriate in your business. Anyway, all right, so that's your game. You have to plan these things out. So the alerts can be an email or text message or pop-up, and the active alerts may, in fact, modify the access control list on the firewall to block the traffic or send the traffic over to Honeypot instead of the real server, things like that. So Honeypots we talked about. Honeypots are fake servers that appear to be attractive, so attackers waste their time hacking into them, but they're not actually getting the real stuff. Yeah?
I have a question on the IDS.
Yeah.
And what type of activity for the network would you upgrade and do a new baseline?
Well, that's of course, you're quite correct there. If you have a baseline and anything changes, you're going to need a new baseline. And in general, every network grows by like 20-30% per year. So anytime you add new servers, anytime you open a new branch, anytime you deploy new desktops, it's kind of a drag. Anytime you change the network traffic in any given way, anytime you open up another online course server or something, like I say, we put on a new system to hand out these Microsoft things, and that changed the expected network traffic immensely. And there was another one that happened here. When they put in this incompetent network forensic device, they found a bunch of stuff they thought were viruses infecting the online course server. It was some part of the normal traffic for the online course server was coming in on strange ports. That one flew around the college. They eventually asked me what I thought of it and stuff. The first time you take a look at your network, you will discover a lot of strange things, and it will take a long time to figure out what's good and what's bad. So, anyway, this happened in another way to teachers. My sister learned at, I think, her college, they told you never let students be your friends on Facebook. And you really don't want to do that, because then they will talk to each other about how they're stealing stuff and cheating in class. You will learn things about their life that you'd probably rather not know. And the same thing happens when you start looking at network traffic. Suddenly you're informed about things you weren't informed about, and you have to decide what to do about them. I wanted to put real-time network monitoring in the lab and video monitoring in the lab so students could practice, but I realized it was not a good idea because it was creating a problem. There would now be these records that could cause trouble, and now there'd be an issue of who's allowed to see them and when do they get destroyed and all that. I decided that the trouble it would make was not worth the educational value. But anyway, so here's honeypots out there. There's quite a few of them. Semantic has them to get ready to get their malware. Microsoft has them like crazy. Lots of honeypots watching the attacks to try to break into passwords. Microsoft once has proposed that everybody should have personal honeypots on their end-user workstation, which is a wild, radical idea, and as far as I know, nobody is doing that yet. But it could be done, especially in this day of virtual machines, if it really turned out to defend you in a major way, which is not entirely clear here. But here's Microsoft's, I think, patent for this. So they're going to have a management server populates honeypotted resources on local host, and then people think they're hacking you, but they're really only getting there. This is to try to do something really largely about those Chinese advanced persistent threat attacks. I mean, the whole security industry has kind of been throwing their hands up in the air and just saying we're helpless. And as you can see, the rate of attacks just goes up and up and up. We are effectively helpless. It's not easy to stop someone. A nation state wants to hack you. Boy, you're in trouble. I mean, if U.S. Marines wanted to kill you, good luck. You can hire all the guards you want. You know, you're toast. And so, you got a nation state attacking you. I don't know. You got to be sneaker than them, and that's not going to be easy. They got a lot of resources. Anyway, so. The 0 days I've talked about before, 0 days are attacks against which there is no known defense. So even if you have a best antivirus and an IDS and it's tuned up with whatever the manufacturer recommends, it's still not going to stop this attack because it's brand new. Nobody knows about it yet. Unless you actually want to have one of these heuristic scanners that can actually work. And those things usually don't do much. Usually if you have a heuristic scanner that will actually notice unusual activity, tuned well enough to stop a 0 day, then it will go off all the time from random network variations anyway. So that's the game. There's lots of 0 days out there all the time. Microsoft patched a few last week, and Adobe patched several in a row for Java. You know, every week or two there's no 0 day found in a common piece of software. The going price for an Internet Explorer 0 day is about $100,000 right now. The U.S. government or foreign governments will cheerfully pay you that much to get it. You have to give it to them and not tell anybody else, and they will use it in these advanced military attacks. And their company that will help, there's several brokers that will set it up for you. And the main, ViewPen does this in France a lot. There are 4 American companies that will also work as brokers. You tell them and they will sell it and you get the money. But you have to not tell anybody else. So honeynets are when you set up a whole network of fake machines trying to attract attacks. There's quite a few versions of that. And there are a lot of people who want to punch back. This is getting more and more popular. Counter-Strike is a new company set up just particularly for this, where you have an active network defense where you punch back anybody that attacks you. Now this is very controversial. Almost nobody does this yet because it's bloody insane. Because I'm already amazed the Chinese did it this way. Real criminals do not do what the Chinese did. They don't connect to your server and take it over. They connect to some random server they've taken over in Brazil, then some random server they've taken over in Pakistan, and then they attack you from there. So when you punch back, you're hitting some random server in Pakistan that's been compromised, so they can't find you and throw you in jail. That's very easy to do. And therefore, if you just have some kind of automatic defense that punches back at whoever's hacking you, you're probably just punching another victim. So it's highly questionable. This is the problem of attribution. You never really know who's attacking you unless they slap you in the face with making it incredibly obvious the way the Chinese have. you will find it's Brazil today and China tomorrow and North Dakota next week. It's random people attacking me, all from apparently the same attacker because they're bouncing off other systems. So, that's not at all in the mainstream. And most people think that's just bloody insane to have some kind of automatic defense. There was a guy, I think in New York City, that did this. He robbed like 4 times in his business, so he put like a shotgun tied to the door. So you pick the door, and open the door, a shotgun would blow you away, and he ended up going to prison for that. That's not legal. You cannot booby trap your house to kill people that robbed you. And I don't think you can booby trap your network to trash anybody that hacks you either for the same reason, because you'll shoot the wrong guy, and then there's a world of pain. So most people think you'd be nuts to use this kind of attack. Yeah?
Are you able to, so you got attacked, and then, this is illegal, but if you went on their system, and then you monitored their log to see what IP is connected to them?
Google did that, and they published it openly. When they found they were hacked by the Chinese, they hacked back and stole back all the data from 30 other companies, and they sent it to them, saying, hey, Adobe, hey, Microsoft, here's your stuff. We found it on this Chinese server. Maybe you should be informed. Mm-hmm. So they totally did it, and there were no consequences. I waited to see what would happen. If it's across national boundaries, I don't think there's any way anybody can sue, but they could send over some agents to poison your coffee or something. I mean, you're down to that kind of stuff. It's just a jungle at that level.
Yeah.
But the point is, if you have an automatic defense, it's going to punch people in the country, and then you're in trouble. So you could at least not let it do that. There are companies in Russia, companies that will sell you a hacking tool to take over anybody you want, but you can only attack people that are not in Russia. That's how they get away with it. So, but as far as I can tell, this is just something that assuages people's feelings of anger. It's not really a practical defense mechanism right now. But anyway, so which one of these will protect the whole network? So that is network-based, yeah, and it's network-based intrusion detection system will protect your whole network. All right, which one is to lure, to distract attackers? That's a honeypot, of course. Good. Yeah.
Would it be something like setting up a honeypot be as simple as basically saying the password server, or like,
it could
this
be
is credit card information, or
sure.
something like that?
It often is. In fact, there are some honeypots like Honeyd that are not even machines. They're just listening processes, and all they'll do is answer like the first few responses, like the handshake. You take a password and tell you it's true or something. Some of them are whole virtual machines, all full of fake data and stuff. It can be as fancy as you want. But it has to be something. Well, there's another one that's incredibly simple. There's one that just records traffic on the IP addresses you're not using. So you own a class B and you're only using 1,000 of them. You take all the traffic that goes to other ones. Anybody sending traffic to those addresses is not a real customer. So if anybody sends traffic to more than 10 addresses you're not using, you block them. It's because they're obviously scanner hunting for targets. They're not a real customer trying to access your resources. But that's a simple one too. Or it can be as complicated as you want. I think the FBI got anonymous with one of these. Mueller, anonymous hacked into the FBI director's email and dumped it all out. And I read it all, trying to figure out how serious it was. It was incredibly dull. I think it was fake email put up there for them to hack, to steal, which is perfectly fine. And so, all right. Which one of these will automatically stop an attack in progress? All right, that's the active IDS off of that list. And IPS would be another good answer. All right. And a deviation from normal behavior. An anomaly. It's a term for it, kind of a silly term, doesn't mean anything, but anyway. It means something you don't have a name for. All right. If you want to adjust the sensitivity of your IDS, which one of these do you adjust? All right, that's the threshold. Good. All right, an unpatched security flaw. All right, they call it a 0 day. By the way, that's because you rate them by how many days since they've been patched. So 30 days, I think it was patched 30 days ago, and 100 days, I think it was patched 100 days ago. And 0 day is one where no patch exists.
So it's like not updating your virus software and you leave it open.
Yes, if you don't update your virus software, then you can be attacked by things that are 30 or 60 or 90 days. And most companies are 18 months behind on their updates. Because updates cause so much trouble that it's very slow, they put them on. It's much They always make the decision, like I would, I turn off the stupid update because I don't want to interrupt my lecture. They all make decisions like that for months and months. It's getting a little better now. So let me check my time. All right, we're good. We can get through one more section. All right, so wireless networks. So you've got a wireless access point, you've got wired clients and wireless clients getting to the internet, and then you've got people you probably don't want on your network. Random people driving by, using your internet connection, perhaps even trying to attack your devices by connecting. So there's different standards out there. 802.11n is the new hotness, 600 megabits per second in principle. Although only you get very expensive routers and access points, most people are still using the 802.11g at 54 megs. B is pretty much over, but it's still out there from old deployments. And A was never much of a hit. Anyway, I know one guy that likes to deploy 802.11a networks, which are very hard to find equipment for because there's almost no interference on that band. So if you do it, companies get less interference, but it doesn't go as well through obstacles, it doesn't go as far. 802.11n is generally considered the best. So if you have a high-power wireless network so people can easily connect and use it, then that means it goes further outside the domain of your company, out the door, out the window, into the parking lot, across the street. So, easier for people to connect who shouldn't be on there also.
So like wireless N?
What's that?
So 802.11n?
802.11n, that's the newest one, yeah.
So that's big footprint?
No, you can adjust any of them to have any footprint you want by changing the power and by changing the antenna placement. Yeah.
Like, are you going to cover the fact that even though you have to do that, you can adjust the power, you can still lock them down by the MAC address, you can still hide them, you can still
Yes.
do all of this other stuff, MAC, IP spooks.
Oh, sure. Yeah. We'll talk about it. Yes, that's right. So there's one issue is just to make it so they can't even detect you, and that would be to keep the radio waves inside your company. And you can't do that perfectly, but you can do a pretty good job, for example, by putting metal paint in the walls. Or you can just have a careful deployment of antennas so they pretty much just only give service in the building and not outside. But then, for real protection, you want to use an encryption protocol that scrambles the data so even if an attacker can detect the network, they can't get in. But as soon as they brought out wireless networks, more than a decade ago, with 802.11b, customers were reluctant to use them because customers could intuitively tell that my data is a lot less safe if I'm using a wireless network. Somebody might get it. So in order to reassure them, they invented this thing called wired equivalent privacy and told them it makes you as safe as if you're using a wire. Now this was a lie. This stuff is complete junk. It doesn't make you safe at all. But for about a year, nobody hacked it, and then people hacked it, and everybody found out it was completely garbage. So the IEEE was unable to come up with a new standard in any reasonable amount of time, so an industry association created something called the Wi-Fi Protected Alliance. They made this Wi-Fi Alliance made this WPA security, which is nothing more than taking WEP and putting 4 little corrections in WEP to stop the attack that was currently hacking into web networks. And it turned out to be extremely successful. This and MS Chat version 2, I think, are 2 success stories in security, where by just patching the exact problems that made one attack work, you were able to actually make something that was pretty secure. So if WPA is perfectly fine, there's now a better version called WPA2. The only reason there are 2 versions is because there was pressure when they sold all these devices using WEP to make a patch that could be a firmware update in those devices so people don't have to buy new routers. They can just update them and be more secure. That's what WPA is. It uses WEP and just keeps changing the key for every packet. WPA2 actually replaces the whole thing with a much more secure encryption protocol, but that requires a more powerful processor in the router. It required people to buy new routers to people that had existing wireless equipment around 1999. Yeah?
Is WPA used for like home routers more likely?
No, most of them use WPA2 now, but WPA or WPA2 are both fine for all practical purposes. Nobody's getting in either one of those except through some other flaw, or unless you choose an obvious password, which they can just guess. But you don't need to know the password at all at WEP. You can just totally get in no matter what it's set to. It's just broken. So that's WEP, mathematically insecure. You can get in 100% of the time if you can capture 50 or 100,000 packets. You just have to compare those packets with some open source software, and it will figure out the key just from looking at those packets, which is really, really lame and unacceptable for any wireless network. I mean, that's why you have mathematics. You should be mathematically safe against an attack like that. WEP is just stupid. WPA is fine. The weakest form uses temporal key integrity protocol and RC4 encryption, which it turns out to be good enough for all practical purposes, but the stronger form uses AES encryption, which can be quite strong. That's WPA2. Right, that's So you can run WPA with stronger encryption too, but WPA2 is the strongest. They both have personal and enterprise modes. The personal mode is where you make up a key and you type it in every device. You go in the router's config page, you type it in every computer that connects to it. That is for home users because a pre-shared key is an intrinsically pointless idea. Once you have a secret and then you share the secret among several devices, it's not really a secret anymore. So now you've got all this problem where you have to write it down, you have to type it in every device, so it can't be long and complicated. It's irritating to change because you have to go change it in every device. So this is pretty much for home users. Business users use the enterprise version here where you have a server, like a domain controller, a server that's keeping track of all the credentials, an 8021X server. And so everybody, each user has their own password, and you can force them to change it. You can remove the passwords from the employees that have left and all that stuff that you need in a business. But it's too much bother for a home user to bother with all this. All right, and now unfortunately, everything was perfectly fine here from about 2002 up until about 2008. You could use WPA and you'd be fine, but the companies decided that home users would have too much difficulty setting up WPA and typing a password in every device. So they invented this thing called Wi-Fi Protected Setup, which automatically generates a key and automatically sends the key to your devices. Unfortunately, they chose an 8-digit key. And it's not even an 8-digit key. The last 4 digits are a separate 4-digit key. The first 4 digits are a separate 4-digit key, and one of those is just a checksum. So there's actually only a total of 10,500 possible keys. So you can just try all 10,500 keys. This is me doing it at home. It took me 19 hours to crack it in. This was my password, long, awful password. You would never crack that password with any kind of mathematical attack. That is way too long. But WPS boiled it down to this 8-digit key, and it was able to crack it in 19 hours by just brute force. The tool it does is called Reaver. It's pretty shameful. Yeah?
Does that mean for the WPA, you're not allowed to use other characters? Like
You are.
You are.
You can use punctuation marks and spaces. You can make the password 35 letters long. WPA can be perfectly secure, but WPS, for your convenience, boils it down to an 8-digit number.
Oh, so it goes down to something weird.
Yes, it turns it into something weak. It doesn't let you use all those passwords. It's disgusting. And even worse than that, it's on by default at every router you can buy these days. It's made in the last 5 years. People think it's wonderful. And in Cisco routers anyway, even if you go in the firmware and turn it off, all that means is it won't work for you anymore, but it still works for the attacker. So it's pretty shameful. It's one of these emperors has no clothes moment. We had perfectly fine security, and then they threw it away with this convenience feature, which is still in wide deployment. By the way, I should mention, for home users, this is not a real risk because home routers are so poorly made that they crash all the time when you run this attack. I had to buy 4 routers at around $100 each before I found one that could withstand this attack without crashing. They're so miserable that if you try about 10 encryption keys, the router crashes and you have to reboot it. Home routers do crash all the bloody time. You probably noticed. You have to keep restarting them. They're just really poorly made. Enterprise class routers are strong enough to suffer from this problem. So if you put metal in the walls, what have you reduced? You have reduced your footprint. Your footprint is the geographical area through which the radio waves go. Yeah?
What metals work better than others?
I don't really know. I don't know how thick it has to be either. It's a good question. I think a screen is good enough. I know you have to have metal dense enough that it gets down to like a quarter of the wavelength. And these are millimeter waves, so your window screen will be good enough. But if it's too thin, some of it will get through. So I don't know, and conductivity at that frequency is what would matter. But I don't know the answer. Yeah?
What about lead inside the wall? Do you have wall?
Lead should be fine, like any other metal. Now lead is often used for other purposes like to stop radioactivity, but any kind of metal would be fine. Like these window screens, we don't have any window screens. These windows block radio. You can't get a cell phone signal here unless you open a window. Those window screens block it. But that doesn't mean, they're attenuating it by a factor of 10 or something. I don't really know how much they're attenuating. So, all right. So which one of these has 11 megabits per second transfer rate? B, the first one that came out. When at that speed, by the way, of course, you never get even half the rate of what they promise you to 11 networks because it has a lot of overhead. Waiting for a chance to sending explicit acknowledgement, resending packets because they get damaged, all wastes about half your bandwidth. And encryption cuts it down by another half. So, When I first heard that, I said, well, that's plenty. My internet connection is only 1 megabit per second anyway, so I'll never need more than 802.11b. But you quickly find out that in the real world, you don't get anything close to that. 600 megs, a much more comfortable number, where even if you're getting a third of it, you still feel like you're moving. That's N, of course, the newest one, 802.11n, which was only officially ratified about a year ago. All right, the first wireless encryption system. And that's WEP, Wired Equivalent Privacy. Which standards have serious security vulnerabilities and should not be used. All right, more than one of them. WPS and WEP, and for that matter, all 4 of them, because if you have WPS, it affects your WPA. It's pretty despicable.
The WPS is the one that has that PKG key.
WPS is the one that ruins WPA and WPA2 by adding something insecure on top of it, which is pretty rude. You'd be better off with an older router. Sort of like wine. You want to get the router that's the right age. You want it between 2002 and 2008, and you'll be fine. Yes?
What is more secure, the WEP without a WPS or a WPA with a WPS?
The second one. Because it takes Reaver 19 hours to hack in, and it takes a good hacker only about 5 minutes to crack web. So,
Can't you crack web with like a wire shard and stuff in packets?
no, you need more than that. You need AirPCAP. You need air crack. And there are different kinds of attacks. When my students do it, it takes them about 10 minutes to get it. Whereas, like I say, Reaver took 19 hours. So, that's some degree of... Both of those are pretty bad. But yeah.
Well, the EP needs a dictionary, doesn't it?
They're all subject to dictionary attacks. If you can guess your password, you can totally get in, of course. And there's nothing you can do about that except use an enterprise deployment that forces people to choose long random passwords or something. That's a fundamental weakness in any kind of system with a pre-shared key, is that they can always try to brute force your dictionary. But you could, in principle, have some kind of lockout thing that locks anybody out, puts in the wrong number after a certain amount of times, and that would help. Yeah?
I don't know if you said it and I didn't hear it or something,
Yeah.
but with WPS, where is that introduced? Because I've never seen it on a router.
It was, you'll see it by a new router. It was added as a convenience feature to make it easy to set up WPS. You'd press a button on the router, press a button on your NIC, and it would exchange this key, and automatically be saved with WPA. You don't have to remember the key or anything. It automatically transmits it. The only problem is the key it generates is way too short. When I first heard about this, I said, this is wonderful. Everybody use WPA. And of course, I immediately assumed it was like a 25-digit random character key. Why would you, since you're not going to have a human typing it in, why isn't it this long and complicated? Of course it will be. But no, they wanted to make it simple so they could put it on the bottom of a label so you could type it in. So they made it no longer than a phone number. Anyway, it's pretty shameful. So which is the most secure standard on that list? WPA2 is, of course, the best.